In this video we will review a post from Reddit whereby a man discloses his thought process on whether to have a child or not and the steps he took to make this decision. I think this is a positive and good story to learn from due to the level of detail and commitment the man permitted into working this part of his life out. He begins. I don't think I'm a particularly compelling writer, but I found a lot of solace and like-minded folks in this subreddit during my decisions about having a child, and hopefully I can give some of that back. I'll also admit that this is looking back a few years. I don't know how accurate the whole timeline is, and mostly remember how I was feeling at the time. I had talked with my future wife about having kids before getting engaged. I agreed that I wanted them, probably two. Looking back, at the time, my desire was very surface level. I did not have many experiences with young kids, and I didn't know the work that was involved in raising them, and was mostly considered the typical positive things men associate with fatherhood, teaching them new things, experiencing the world in a new way, etc. Most of what I knew about kids was Kodak moments. End of the quote here. I think it is of note that this man had only thought of the surface level effect on his life and not yet the more menial day-to-day impact. To continue his post. We got engaged in February of 2016 and planned to get married in August 2017. I don't remember all the discussions we had about kids during this time. I think it was assumed by both of us that we would start trying for a kid after getting married. There were a few life complications, namely going to grad school, living apart for a few months, starting a new job, etc. During this time our friends started having children, one born in late summer and one in winter 2018. Along with these kids came a lot more discussions about having kids. We hadn't explicitly laid out a timeline for having kids, but I think seeing many of our friends starting to have kids really kick-started my partner to start wanting some clarity. She had always made it clear that having children was a priority, and that she was already a little disappointed at how late in life she was starting. To interject again, I would note that in early stages of relationships it would be a good idea to have things like this road mapped before making a life-altering commitment such as marriage. There are a lot put on the line here due to assumption. He continues. As I was seeing my friends prepare, worry, and plan for having kids, I was getting more curious, and more worried, about how mechanically children would work in our marriage. I started researching more about fatherhood, and parenting. Listened to one book together, All Joy and No Fun, which I would recommend for those who don't really know the work that goes into modern parenting. Me and my partner had a lot of good discussions about parenting and how we would do it, and what was important to us, and what the process of pregnancy would look like. We also discussed some of the limits of what we would do to become pregnant. At this time, I made the offhand remark that I would not want to undergo any medical intervention to have a kid. I didn't expect infertility to be an issue. End quote. I think it is interesting that he didn't want medical intervention. I'm not sure why this would be an issue for him. This might have been an early sign for him that he wasn't into the idea wholly, as surely one would part the sea to have a child. Continuing on. We bought a house together the fall of 2018. It was a fixer-upper, but livable, and we bought it with the consideration that we would eventually have children in it. We started trying to have kids in earnest somewhere around this time. I don't remember the exact time we stopped using protection, but after buying a house my partner got more into temping and tracking her cycles to understand the optimal time to try. Along with this came her disappointment, month after month, of not becoming pregnant. This was a really tough time emotionally for both of us. I had taken the stress of home ownership poorly, and my partner was suffering her own stress from trying to conceive. Our relationship was strong, we had dealt with a lot of complicated issues and our communication was good, but this was definitely one of the lower points of the relationship to that point. It was at this point that I started having doubts about having a kid. Sometimes I would be filled with a sense of dread after sex that this had been the time that we would conceive, and that there was nothing I could do about having a kid. Interruption here. If one feels dread for a situation, I'm unsure why one would willing pursue said situation. Continuing on. About 6 months into trying, my partner started talking to her obstetrician-gynecologist about infertility, got tested, and came back with a clean bill of health. Shortly after that, I also got my sperm tested. After an additional test, the diagnosis came back, severe azoospermia. I had less than a dozen motile sperm in a sample. Basically, conceiving without a medical intervention was not an option for me anymore. This was not defining factor of my thinking, but it definitely made me go back to the beginning on thinking. My insurance would cover up to 3 rounds of IVF, so cost was not a huge concern. I was more concerned about the stress of going through the process, especially as it related to our previous issues trying to conceive. At this point I was firmly on the fence. I knew I wanted to stay with my partner, and I knew that having kids was what she wanted, and I was willing to do almost anything for her, but on the other side, the idea of added responsibility of a kid on top of the stress I was feeling with everyday life as a homeowner sent me into a panic. Also at this time we had gotten to see our friends in their new roles as parents. I was terrified at the people they had become. They felt so different from the people I knew, and it felt like they had thrown out who they were to take on the role as parents. These doubts formed the basis of what we talked about together in couples counseling the following months. I did not see the positives of fatherhood, and I was worried about how a child would fit into our lives and what we wanted to accomplish, both as individuals and as a couple. We also both read through the baby decision together and talked through the discussion points. Although this was a difficult time, thanks to counseling and that book, we were so much better at communicating our feelings, and things did not feel as hopeless as they had earlier in the year. Couples counseling brought up some individual issues that we decided to work through separately. For me, a lot of it revolved around what I wanted with my life. To inject once more. What I like about this post and this man's approach is he has looked at different books and experiences of his friends. It shows that he has stopped to consider this. It seems the main flaw was in his initial thinking around parenthood. Something he will pay for next. He continues. After working with my individual therapist, around March of this year, I finally came off the fence on the child-free side. I know you're probably wondering how I did this. It was something I had struggled with for almost a year. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when or how. There was one exercise in the baby decision which I thought about a lot. If your partner died, would you be satisfied raising the child on your own? I immediately knew the answer to this question. I would be miserable. The only reason I had to have a child was my partner. This is an incredibly strong and tempting reason, and I think it could even work out in some cases. But, I knew that ultimately, at the end of the day, my first priority is myself, and I could never compromise to have a kid be a priority over that, and if I was forced to do this, I would resent the kid. To comment upon this. This is one of the most important parts of a child-free approach. To have a child you seem to have to give up your entire being, your entire self. I do not think most people realize this. He goes on. I don't think this is fair to a child. I did not feel comfortable being a father with this attitude. Through the whole thing as well I thought to all the decisions I've made in my life, some of them very complex and far-reaching, but all of them had been easy. I'd known what I wanted and what to do. The decision to have a child, on the other hand, was hard. I think I had the feeling all along that something wasn't right. I still think today, after everything, that this was the right decision for me, right now. After talking this over with my partner, and shortly going back to couples counseling, we decided that the best decision at that point was to separate. My partner could not imagine life without regret if she did not have a child and need to try to conceive if she could. We've been separated for 3 months now. The mechanical process of separating is a cakewalk compared to deciding to separate. Obviously there are a lot of emotional issues which I'm still working through, and will continue to for the next few months at least. I am just now beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. This decision was the hardest I've ever made. I don't envy any of you in a similar position. I wish you all luck, and more importantly the strength to make the right decision for you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope I can be helpful. I will end this video noting that this man has probably incurred legal fees due to his separation and will likely have now going forward in his relationships, as this will now be a prevalent point when dating. I commend this chap however for his decision and bravery to stick with it. I hope this video has been helpful and informative.